There's still one big question that must be answered at the quarterback position for Dow Loggins, Shane Beamer, and the rest of South Carolina's football program heading into and eventually coming out of spring practice. And that question is this: which quarterbacks are still going to be on the roster coming out of the spring period? Because there's no sources that I have with what I'm about to say. This is just a gut feeling here. I feel like that a quarterback is going to be leaving and entering the transfer portal after spring practice. Because here's the thing, y'all, the quarterback room is starting to get a little bit overcrowded. Spencer Rattler is obviously the incumbent starter heading into 2023, and unless there's some really horrific injury, which obviously, hopefully, does not happen, Spencer Rattler is going to be behind center once again in 2023. But behind Spencer Rattler sits 5 scholarship quarterbacks now at this current moment. And the thing is, there's another one that's going to be on his way this next winter in Dante Reno when Spencer Rattler eventually ends up walking out the door. So when looking at these quarterbacks that are on the roster, which quarterbacks could end up being maybe the ones that really need to take a step forward this upcoming spring? Well, I'll start off with some of the ones that I don't think are going to be in that category, and that's going to start with Luke Doty. Doty has played in 19 games up to this point in his career, starting in 6 of them, and obviously, he's been a bit of a mixed bag. I would still argue that he's yet to have really ideal circumstances surrounding him when he's been the starting quarterback. He's the most experienced backup by far out of this entire group, and I believe that he's going to be the heir apparent to Spencer Rattler for at least 2024 after Rattler walks out the door, and that's going to be due to the loyalty that he has shown to the program up to this point. So I certainly don't think that Luke Doty is going to be the guy that could walk out the door after spring practice. Tanner Bailey is another guy that, has not played a whole lot, but he's got a lot of promise in terms of what he brings to the football field. He can alter his passes based on what's needed during a play, and he can also make throws off platform. He did this to a great extent during his senior season at Gordo High School in Alabama back in 2021. And the other thing is, Beamer has called him multiple times one of the hardest workers on the entire football team. A guy that basically has a first one in, last one out type of mentality, both in the film room and in the weight room as well. So Tanner Bailey, I don't think that he's going to be a guy that could potentially be leaving after spring. Lenore Sellers, he's the rookie out of the group. He quite literally just got to campus around a month and a half or so ago, and he offers a ton of potential at the college level. We talked about this before. I think Lenore Sellers has the potential to be the best quarterback in school history. I think that he's got the perfect blend of size, arm strength, athleticism, can adjust passes kind of like Tanner Bailey, and he's also got a quick release to boot with all of that. So there's no shot that Lenore Sellers is going to be moving on after spring practice. Which leaves us with 2 more quarterbacks, and in my opinion, probably the 2 guys where if you're either of these guys, you probably want to have the best spring practice possible this upcoming March and April. And that's Braden Davis and Colton Gather. So let's start off with Braden Davis. Davis redshirted last season as well, and besides a couple of solid throws in the spring game this past April, he didn't really play at all with this team this past year. But again, he does have some quality traits to his game. He's got size, being listed at 6'5". He's got leadership skills that he possesses and brings to the football field. He's got solid scrambling ability, and he's also somebody that can throw the football on the run quite well. So he's going to be a guy that I'm going to be watching quite closely throughout spring practice, because it's not really through any fault of Braden Davis's, but again, with how crowded this room is getting, the addition of Lenore Sellers, who probably, at least in the minds of the fan base, is already going to be slotted ahead of Braden Davis on the depth chart, Davis is probably a guy that is going to have to take a step forward this spring. And that leads us with our last quarterback in Colton Gather, who has thrown 1 pass in his 3 seasons in Columbia up to this point, and also played in the spring game this past April, a lot more so than Braden Davis. And Colton threw 2 picks this past spring. And quite honestly, there were times where it just didn't really seem like that Colton was reading the entire football field when he was throwing the football from the pocket. And the thing is, he's about to go into potentially his fourth season here at South Carolina, and it just kind of seems like that South Carolina keeps on adding another solid quarterback with every single recruiting cycle, and it's adding a lot more competition for Colton. So, kind of like Braden Davis, I think that Colton is a guy that if you want to be able to stick around in Columbia after this spring period, you've got to take a step forward. You've got to really show the coaches some good stuff on the practice field and eventually in the spring game where he's probably going to get a lot more snaps once again. So, out of all these quarterbacks, I would say the two that probably really need to treat this spring practice period with a lot more seriousness are probably Braden Davis and Colton Gather. Obviously, I'm not going to make any sort of prediction as to who I think would win that kind of battle there, but again, there's probably going to be one guy that is leaving this quarterback room and South Carolina's football team after spring practice, and it's going to be interesting to see how everything plays out, especially with a new offensive coordinator and quarterback coach now in town in Dowell Loggins.